June 8th, 1966. After hearing reports of a menacing tornado slowly approaching the outskirts of Topeka, Kansas, 19-year-old Rick Douglas of WREN Radio quickly got into his car and headed toward the highest point in Topeka, Burnett's Mound. Douglas was a young storm spotter, wannabe reporter. He saw the approaching tornado as an opportunity to showcase his reporting skills that would hopefully lead to more opportunities in the highly competitive field. Once he reached the top of Burnett's Mound, he looked to his southwest and saw nature in one of its most beautiful yet terrifying forms. He witnessed, for the first time in his life, a massive wedge tornado. Awestruck by its presence, Douglas stared at the tornado for over a minute, but the tornado didn't seem to be moving. In fact, it appeared to be stationary. Unfortunately, Douglas was wrong. The tornado was indeed moving, and it was heading straight towards him. Eventually, the tornado got close enough that Douglas realized the dangerous situation he was in. Douglas immediately tried to escape by heading down the switchback road in his car towards Gage Boulevard. While driving, Douglas managed to report the incoming tornado over the radio. He yelled over the radio, "Tornado sighting! Take cover in the southwest side of Topeka right now!" The tornado was getting closer and closer to Rick as he continued down the road. Eventually, he came across the I-70 overpass, where he pulled over and tried to seek shelter. All around, Douglas could see homes being torn up and destroyed. He tried to quickly scramble under the overpass, but it was too late. The tornado picked him up and threw him over 100 feet in the air, where he stayed suspended for over 30 seconds. Suddenly, everything went dark. About 20 minutes later, Rick woke up in a muddy ditch over a block away from the overpass. He was being transported to a hospital when a reporter snapped this iconic photo of him. Due to this photo, Rick Douglas has become known as the Mud Man. His photo was displayed in several newspapers, and over the years, it cemented itself as a piece of tornado lore. Some urban legends stated that Rick Douglas died only a few minutes after this photo was taken, but miraculously, Rick Douglas actually survived. He remains one of the very few to have actually been picked up and dropped by a tornado and have lived to tell the tale. Not only did Rick survive a tornado, he survived one of the strongest and most destructive tornadoes in history, the June 8th, 1966 Topeka, Kansas F5. What's even more crazy is that Rick continually discovered small bits of debris embedded in his skin for many years after the event. In the last video, the Joplin documentary, I talked about how the Joplin tornado was essentially a tornado worst case scenario, an F5 or EF5 tornado tearing through a highly populated area. Well, the same can be said about the 1966 Topeka F5. Kansas is obviously very well known for tornadoes. The fact that Kansas is the setting of the tornado scene in The Wizard of Oz is no mistake. Kansas has seen some of the most powerful tornadoes in recorded history: Udall, Greensburg, Andover, the Heston twins, but none of these events were quite as bad in terms of destruction as the Topeka F5 in 1966. See, thankfully, most Kansas tornadoes, they occur over the open plains, usually in very rural areas. There are only a few highly populated cities in Kansas that, if struck by a tornado, would be utterly devastating. There's Wichita, Lawrence, Kansas City. Yes, I know Kansas City is mostly in Missouri, but it's on the border. It's pretty much in Kansas. And Topeka. There have been a few close calls with other cities in Kansas, but only one, Topeka, has undergone a direct hit from an F5. And it didn't just strike a suburb on the side of the city. No. This tornado tore straight through the center, even striking high-rise buildings downtown. There was so much destruction that it caused over $100 million of damage in 1966 money. That's $1 billion in 2025, absolutely unheard of for other tornado events of the time. In fact, it remained the #1 costliest tornado for decades. And today, we're going over the whole story: the buildup, the initial phases, the destruction, the casualties, the lore, and of course, the remnants that can still be seen to this day. In fact, I have lined up several area damage photos on Google Earth. I really did line it up with the same angle and everything just to see if there's any damage left to this day. This took a lot of work, so please like the video. It really helps out with the algorithm. If you like the video for some reason, it really pushes the video. But with that said, let's get into the 1966 Topeka F5 documentary. But before we get to that, a quick word from today's video sponsor, Morgan & Morgan. Man, this guy will just not stop tailgating me. What the heck? Dude, slow up! Have you or a loved one recently been injured in a car accident? When you're seriously hurt, your injury could be worth millions, and Morgan & Morgan is here to help. Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm, featuring over 100 offices nationwide and over 1,000 lawyers who specialize in many different areas, including personal injury, civil rights, medical malpractice, class action lawsuits, nursing home abuse, defective products, and so much more. Morgan & Morgan doesn't just settle for lowball offers. Just in the past couple of months, Morgan & Morgan saw verdicts of $12 million in Florida, 34 times the highest insurance offer, $26 million in Philadelphia, 40 times the highest insurance offer, and $6.8 million in New York, 25 times the highest insurance offer. Morgan & Morgan has recovered over $25 billion for its clients over the past 35 years. Oh, and speaking of money, guess what? The fee is free unless you win. That's right, no upfront costs, no sign-up fees, all the paperwork, research, expert witnesses, negotiations, court hearings, it's all free unless you and your legal team win. You can start a claim with America's largest injury law firm in just one click. It's so easy. You can start your claim now with Morgan & Morgan at www.forthepeople.com/Swiggle Studios, or you can click the link in the description. Again, that's www.forthepeople.com/Swiggle Studios. Submit your claim today. Thank you so much to Morgan & Morgan for sponsoring the video. The morning of June 8, 1966 over northern Kansas was actually quite cool. Usually tornadoes are preceded by hot, humid days, but in this case, the weather was quite nice. It was a beautiful late spring day. School had just gotten out for the summer, kids were outside, likely playing a game of baseball. It seemed like a normal day to the residents of Topeka. Mostly everyone was oblivious of the incoming threat. There were a few experts, however, who were a bit concerned. Down at the National Weather Bureau in Oklahoma, meteorologists saw several key indications that could lead to the development of supercells over the Central Plains, the kind of thunderstorms that produce violent tornadoes. Essentially, there were three main factors: very high dew points, an incoming warm front with an associated low pressure system over Texas, and an active jet stream over northern Kansas. It really was a classic late in the day tornado setup, and the people at the National Weather Bureau were worried that as the warm front moved in over northern Kansas, it would clash with the jet stream, leading to supercell formation and a tornado outbreak. In fact, things were already beginning to stir up. Around mid-afternoon, the very first supercells began to develop over central Kansas. One of these supercells produced the first tornado of the day, a tiny rope tornado that formed around 4:18 p.m. in Rice County. This tornado quickly dissipated and caused no damage, but about 2 hours later, closer to 6 p.m., another supercell to the north produced a more significant F2 tornado that managed to damage a few farms in Clay County. Further to the east in Riley County, an F3 formed that caused major damage to the city of Manhattan and the Kansas State University campus. Thankfully, there were no deaths, but there were over 60 injuries. The big tornado, though, was yet to come. With the development of several tornado-producing supercells, the National Weather Bureau issued a tornado watch for all of eastern Kansas. However, this is Kansas. In June, the people of Topeka and other surrounding areas, they were used to summer tornado watches, so most of the people just continued on with their evening. But not everyone. See, this was during the golden age of storm spotters. Back in the 1960s, way before Doppler radar, you couldn't really rely on, radar imagery to find tornadoes. They did have military radars, but they weren't nearly as accurate as the crazy Doppler radar tech that we have today. For this reason, there was a large network of storm spotters. These people were, in some ways, the very first storm chasers. But most of them weren't going out to film tornadoes and upload them to YouTube. They were going out with their radios, ringing into police stations and radio stations if they saw an incoming threat, if they saw a tornado or funnel cloud. When the tornado watch was issued, these storm enthusiasts skipped their evening meals, jumped in their cars, and went searching, often in places of high elevation, like Rick Douglas from the intro. These storm spotters usually worked for local radio or TV stations, and by the end of the evening, they would prove to be the guardian angels for the city of Topeka. One such storm spotter named Ed Rutherford set up shop near the small town of Auburn, just to the southwest of Topeka. As dark clouds rolled in from the southwest, Rutherford kept his eyes on the sky, looking for any signs of a funnel. Suddenly, around 6:50 p.m., Rutherford spotted a thin rope tornado descend just west of Auburn. He immediately phoned into his partnering station WIBW, who issued the very first tornado warning for the city of Topeka. Bill Kurtis of WIBW went live on TV to track the storm. At this point, the tornado was actually quite beautiful. It was only 50 meters wide and was lit up by the sun, creating a beautiful white column, similar to this tornado. But looks can be deceiving. The early, weak stages of the tornado still managed to tear up several farmsteads throughout the countryside. One such farmstead was that of the Hofmeisters. The Hofmeisters had noticed the dark clouds to the southwest and decided to flip on their TV for any updates. Tuning into WIBW, the Hofmeisters heard the report given by Ed Rutherford of the tornado crossing near the Pauline-Dover Road. This road was located right next to the Hofmeisters. Startled by the report, they quickly ran over to the window to see a massive column of dirt and debris quickly heading towards them. They immediately ran out and took shelter in their storm cellar. The tornado completely destroyed their home, leaving only a few walls, the fireplace, and the foundation. The Hofmeisters were lucky to have turned on their TV. Their next-door neighbors, on the other hand, had no idea of the approaching tornado. The elderly couple, Calvin and Clarice Wolfe, were struck and killed by the tornado, and they would become the very first victims of the event. The tornado continued to tear through the countryside, traveling around 30 miles per hour, getting increasingly larger and more violent, and it was heading straight towards Topeka. But there was a small piece of hope for the city of Topeka. On the southwest edge of the city was a small hill referred to as Burnett's Mound. This little bluff was a popular tourist attraction as visitors on top could get an excellent view of the whole city. Situated in a field near the mound was the grave of Potawatomi Chief Abram Burnett. Chief Burnett was one of the earliest settlers of Topeka. In fact, he farmed much of the area around the mound. Chief Burnett was also a pretty intelligent and imposing man. He was highly respected locally, and when he passed in 1870, the city of Topeka named the hill right next to his land after him. It was a popular legend throughout the 20th century that Burnett's Mound protected the city of Topeka from approaching tornadoes, since it was located in the southwest and most tornadoes approach from the southwest. The theory was that the mound somehow broke up the inner vortices of the tornado, disrupting the funnel, therefore leading to its dissipation. Well, the theory was about to be tested. The tornado was likely at an F4 or F5 strength and was heading straight towards the mound. Several storm spotters located atop the mound radioed the approaching storm. At this time, the civil defense sirens went off in the city of Topeka. People freaked out and made a quick dash to their basements and storm cellars. There were people ditching their cars, hiding under overpasses. People ran into local stores to seek shelter in the corners of the store. Now, this is actually a pretty significant event. This is indeed one of the very first uses of civil defense sirens as a warning of an approaching tornado. These sirens, they weren't meant for tornadoes. They were strictly for an incoming nuclear attack. Using them during a tornado was not considered appropriate at the time, but the local people said screw it, and they sounded the alarm. The sirens did prove to be quite effective, something that we will talk about later in the video. So did Burnett's Mound protect the city of Topeka? Absolutely not. The tornado went right over it as if it was nothing. Many people after the event actually stated that Chief Burnett was upset. He was angry that the city had just recently put an interstate through the side of his hill, and a couple of years prior to the tornado they built a water tower on top of it. He was upset and he decided to punish the city and not protect them from this specific tornado. But in reality, tornado myths are just really common with large cities. There are myths about rivers protecting cities, skyscrapers protecting cities, the heat from the pavement somehow, disrupting tornadogenesis. The truth is, cities are just geographically rare, especially downtown portions. Look at Kansas. Clearly the odds are way more likely that you're going to have a tornado out in the middle of nowhere, as most of the state is indeed out in the middle of nowhere. So yes, the Burnett's Mound myth was busted, and the tornado came roaring over. Truly a terrifying image. Think of it like this, okay? You're in Topeka, you hear the sirens going off, you hear all the reports of the approaching tornado, but you look outside and you don't see anything because it's hidden behind a hill. But suddenly, out of nowhere, the tornado makes an appearance on top of the hill and then comes into the city. Just like that one scene in Steven Spielberg's War of the Worlds. This moment was actually captured on film. James Ward saw the tornado coming over the mound and captured this video. An incredible piece of footage. Look at this portion of the footage right here. Do you see this car flying down the hill right here? Could that be Rick Douglas trying to escape before he was thrown into the tornado? Maybe. The tornado then crossed the mound and entered the city of Topeka. It began tearing through the residential areas over 29th and Gage Boulevard. The destruction was unbelievable. Homes destroyed, cars spewed about. Several apartment buildings were also destroyed. Here's an aerial photo showing the initial damage over Burnett's Mound. This right here is Burnett's Mound itself, and here is the recently built water tower. As you can see, there was quite a bit of damage. Just past the homes were a few apartment buildings that were also destroyed. By the way, it was inside these apartment buildings where Rick Douglas's car was later discovered. In fact, this right here is the overpass where many tried to seek shelter. Now here is the exact same angle lined up with a modern view on Google Earth. Clearly, Topeka has expanded quite a bit. In fact, if Chief Burnett was upset about the interstate and water tower, he would be really upset now. I mean, they've really developed all over this mound. We will come back to this image and others like it later in the video when we're looking for remnants of tornado damage. The initial destruction through these neighborhoods was also captured on film. As the tornado was tearing through Gage Boulevard, WIBW cameraman Tom Fondley was driving down Interstate 40. He pulled over and was able to film this video. It was now 7 p.m. and Perry Riddle was with his family at the Countryside Methodist Church located right here. In the parking lot in front of the church, Perry could see the approaching tornado crossing over Burnett's Mound. He pulled out his camera and began taking one of the most iconic tornado photo sequences of all time. Here's the very first photo of the sequence. Now what's super cool is that this particular church has not really changed since 1966. So if we go onto Google Maps and line up the buildings, we can get an exact angle. See, the building is essentially the same. In his photos, you can see dozens of families scrambling into the church looking for shelter. This photo right here has proven to become the most iconic. It's a pretty eerie photo. The silhouettes, and it's got some eerie vibes. This silhouette is actually a man who went by the name of Woody Woodward. He was a local building contractor who had built thousands of homes in the Topeka area over his lifetime. He was also an avid shooter and a World War II veteran. Woody passed away in 2013 and lived to be 93 years old. Perry Riddle would continually take photos of the tornado as it tore through residential homes and apartment buildings. While it wasn't heading directly towards him, it was definitely getting closer and closer. Thankfully for him, it pivoted more towards the west, but as the tornado got closer, Riddle walked further down into the parking lot and took a series of photographs with the photo behind this suburb. Of course, on Google Maps, I had to check out the suburb to see how it looks today, and well, there's a lot more trees. But this is the exact same street as this street. Towards the end of Riddle's photo sequence, the details of the tornado become clearer and clearer. You can see horizontal vortices and actual pieces of debris suspended in the air. Truly an incredible photo sequence that has become historic and was heavily studied at the time. It was now 7:08 and the tornado was continually creeping through southwest Topeka, causing a path of destruction. At this time, the tornado was near peak strength and over a half a mile wide. Calls were coming in from all over the city. The tornado was now out in the open where everyone could see it. This photo shows a newly built residential area in southwest Topeka, and some of the damage on the street does look to be in the F4, maybe F5 range. Especially when you look at this image that was captured on the same street. If this photo was taken right after the event, that right there is definitely F5 damage. That's a clean swept foundation, but it could have been taken, several weeks after the event, after they cleaned up. So we don't know for sure, but I mean, that's some pretty intense tornado damage right there. Either way, the tornado was definitely extremely violent. Thankfully, in its path was a large and open green park. I mean, this could have been a residential area, but it was actually a park. Looking back at the Burnett Mounds photo, you can see this green park right here. Now, using this water tower as a reference, we can match it up with this photo of aerial damage. Right here is the same water tower. Now, this is actually a hospital. Thankfully, the tornado managed to dodge that. However, more residential areas would eventually be destroyed, and straight ahead in its path past these residential homes was Washburn University. At the time, there were various groups on the campus. Dozens of students were inside the McVicker Chapel putting on a concert. Also on campus, in the science building, was the WIBW news reporter Bill Kurtis's wife and child. While Kurtis was live on the air, he received information that the tornado was heading straight towards the campus, and obviously he became incredibly worried about his wife and child. The moment was caught on camera.
It's in this part of the city right now, 17th and Webster. At least one house was demolished there.
Bill Kurtis knew he needed to do something to convey the severity of the situation. He knew he needed to do whatever he could to make people take the tornado seriously. He thought about swearing on live TV to get their attention. And for 1966, he kind of did.
Now all we can do, and the best service we can perform now, is to, I hope you have gotten the message by now, for the east part of Topeka, it should be alerted. The entire city was alerted earlier. It is now moving toward the north part of the city. If you live in the north part or on the northern edge, for God's sake, take cover.
For God's sake, take cover. This remains one of the most iconic, most famous tornado live coverage moments ever. I did a video a long time ago about impactful live tornado coverage moments, including James Spann during the 2011 super outbreak.
Of downtown Coleman, a tornado emergency, violent tornado coming up on downtown Tuscaloosa. Be in a safe place right now.
And Dave Freeman during the 2007 Greensburg EF5.
As we go through these next few minutes, you want to move down to the basement, and you want to go to the center of the basement. That's underneath something sturdy, like a workbench, a work table, or maybe the stairs down to the basement if they're in the center of the room. Center of the basement, lowest level, away from windows.
But this moment from Bill Kurtis during the 1966 Topeka F5 belongs in the same ranks. Truly an iconic moment that has been credited with saving many lives, perhaps hundreds of lives.
For God's sake, take cover.
Interestingly, Bill Kurtis became quite famous later in his career, working for CBS. He was also the presenter of Cold Case Files, perhaps you've heard of it, and perhaps it was his excellent coverage of the Topeka tornado that really helped to catapult him in to larger stations and audiences. The tornado tore through Washburn University's campus around 7:10, destroying several historic stone buildings. McVicker Chapel, where the choir had been performing a concert, was heavily damaged. Amazingly, no one died in the chapel. Thankfully, the students had fled to the basement when they heard the tornado sirens. Most of the damaged buildings had to be completely demolished after the event, which is really quite a shame. I mean, these are pretty cool looking buildings, pretty historic. Here's a photo showcasing all the damage at Washburn University, and here's the exact same angle and area today on Google Earth. This round corner parking lot is a good reference point. As you can tell by the photo, the tornado actually exited right over this parking lot and began destroying more homes and several residential areas. In these neighborhoods, 4 would lose their lives. Here's yet another aerial photo captured right after the tornado tore through the neighborhoods near Washburn University. Here's Washburn University on the right. You see there's that parking lot right there. These homes were definitely much older when compared to the initial suburbs near Burnett's Mound. It doesn't quite look like F5 damage to me, more like F3 or F4. Still though, one would not want to be within the path. Near downtown Topeka is this, a very brutalistic looking water tower, and this water tower serves as an excellent reference point when looking at tornado damage. Numerous area and ground-based photography show this water tower. Sometimes it's up close and sometimes it's off in the distance. But with this water tower, we can have a pretty good idea of where the tornado most heavily impacted downtown Topeka. At this time over at WIBW Studios, several news people saw the tornado tearing through the city. They took out their cameras and began filming. It was now 7:20 and the tornado was heading straight towards the commercial district of downtown Topeka. Fortunately, the downtown area wouldn't take a direct strike. Only the southeast corner of the downtown was in the direct path. One of the buildings that was in the direct path was this one right here, the Santa Fe Switchboard Communications Building. Within the building, several telephone switchboard operators were incredibly busy with hundreds of callers who were hurt or needed rescuing. There were calls for doctors, ambulances, power linemen, fires were even being reported, and around 7:22, all of the female operators suddenly experienced intense ear pain from the low pressure region of the tornado. The tornado was literally hitting their building and they could feel it. If you've ever been in a tornado, which most people have not, but if you're like that 0.00001% of people that have been in a tornado, one of the signs of being inside a tornado is having your ears pop from the low pressure. Hopefully, if you feel this, you're already in your shelter. However, the switchboard operators had no time to evacuate or seek shelter. They had a job to do. And thankfully, the building was able to withstand 200-mile-per-hour winds. This right here is the state capitol building. Now the capitol building was not directly hit by the tornado. The tornado went just to the southeast, but a huge chunk of debris was lofted up by the tornado and thrown straight towards the capitol dome, damaging it. A lot of buildings in downtown Topeka that were not inside the path still received quite a bit of damage from the tornado throwing projectiles all over the place. Many of the smaller commercial buildings were also completely leveled. Overall, 4 lives were lost in the downtown district of Topeka. After passing through downtown, the tornado crossed Interstate 70 and continued to destroy more residential neighborhoods near the rail yard. Here's an aerial image of the damage. The rail yard is right here, and right next to it are several destroyed neighborhoods. Some of the most heavily impacted streets were Northeast Sumner Avenue and North Atchison Avenue in the suburb of Oakland. In these neighborhoods, 3 individuals would lose their lives. Thankfully, the tornado was finally beginning to weaken. As it left the outskirts of Topeka, it crossed the Billard Airport runway. Very close to the path of the tornado and the airport was the Weather Bureau office of Topeka. In fact, they were able to get a radar image of the parent supercell hook echo. I couldn't find the actual image, they just have drawings of the image, but it looked something like this. It was now 7:29, and after crossing the Kansas River, the tornado finally dissipated. Some photos taken late in the tornado's life show it weakening and roving out. Throughout its lifetime, the tornado traveled a distance of 22 miles, from the rural areas near Auburn all the way through the heart of Topeka. Just moments after the event, hundreds of people fled their homes to check out the damage and help out in any way possible. In the end, 17 people lost their life and an additional 500 were seriously injured. 820 homes have been completely destroyed and over 4,000 were damaged in some way. The eastern part of Topeka, near the university and rail yard, was the most heavily damaged part of the city, as these homes were built very close to one another. On top of the 820 destroyed homes, 250 commercial buildings were also destroyed near downtown. The 1966 Topeka F5 may have been the first true urban tornado disaster. Like I said in the intro, the final damage cost was estimated at $100 million. Adjusted for inflation is $1 billion, making it to this day one of the costliest tornadoes of all time. The Kansas National Guard was deployed to the impacted parts of the city. Also, the mayor, Chuck Wright, had a very intense warning for looters, claiming that if any looters were in the heavily damaged areas, they would be shot on sight. Yeah. Over 3,000 were left homeless after the event, and power wouldn't be restored to the city for weeks. Years later, the National Weather Service rated the Topeka tornado as an F5, the highest possible tornado rating. Estimated wind speeds were over 250 miles per hour. Here's a snippet of a radio broadcast discussing the tornado aftermath the next morning on June 9th.
The death toll stands officially at 14. An estimated 450 persons were injured. And at one point during the early morning hours, the mayor of Topeka told me at least 4,000 persons had been left homeless. The mayor also said damage had been estimated at $100 million. This a preliminary estimate. Before the tornado had finished with Topeka, it had cut a 15-mile-long path running from southwest to northeast, a path at times at least 1/2 mile wide. And you see the results. It leveled apartment buildings, tore roofs away from houses, uprooted trees, tore telephone poles from the ground. Water lines broke, spewing water into the air like a giant geyser. Gas lines ruptured, but fortunately there were no serious fires. This morning when dawn broke, it was hard to realize that this had happened.
Now, the 1966 Topeka F5 is actually one of the most significant tornado events of all time because it was actually the very first time proper tornado safety precautions were implemented. Let me take you back to only 15 years before the Topeka F5. Another massive F5 tore through Waco, Texas in 1953, claiming 114 lives. Another F5 during that same year killed 115 in Flint, Michigan. However, incredibly, the Topeka F5, which by the way caused way more damage since it was by far the costliest tornado of all time, only claimed 17 lives. Of course, 17 lives is still a lot. I'm not trying to diminish that, but that's way less than Waco and Flint. The tornado impacted way more people but only killed a small amount when compared to other tornadoes. Why is that? Well, remember, this tornado event was one of the first to feature tornado sirens. That had a huge impact. I mean, the people in the McVicker Chapel, that was like a couple dozen people right there. They didn't go to the basement until they heard the sirens. Also, the Storm Spotting Network and the amazing live coverage undoubtedly saved hundreds. Throughout the late 50s and early 60s, tornado forecasting and preparedness advanced in so many ways, and those advancements can clearly be seen in the aftermath of Topeka. I mean, there were even tornado safety videos at this time. But it wasn't just the advancements in tornado preparedness. The residents of Topeka were in some ways also pretty lucky. The tornado tore through the city after 7 p.m. Most of the people in the city were already at home and near a TV. Had this happened at like 2 p.m., the tornado would have likely killed many more, especially on the Washburn campus and downtown. In the end, we had the storm spotters and reporters like Bill Kurtis to thank. Their coverage and often sacrificing actions saved hundreds of lives. But now it's time to look for remnants. Do any remnants from this tornado remain? It's important to note that this was a long time ago. So, I mean, it's a long shot, but I love looking for remnants. People who watch this channel know that I love looking for remnants. So yeah, I'm just going to kind of do this live a little bit. I'm going to be looking at these images and kind of comparing them to the Google Earth modern view, going down the same streets, seeing if anything has changed or if there's any, weird cement blocks or something, I don't know. And I will speed it up until I find something notable. But we're going to start off with this first neighborhood right here. I'm just going to go into Google Street View and start moving. Oh, look at this. We found tornado remnants. This tree branch fell 60 years ago and it's still here. That was a joke, obviously. Anyway, not much in this neighborhood. We're going to move on to the neighborhood close to the hospital. You can kind of tell where these two little roads merge right here. I'm going to be looking around that area. Again, not much. I know it's kind of a long shot, but we're still gonna look. Okay, so this image right here has the Brutalist water tower. This is gonna be extremely helpful for maybe finding some things, because this is a pretty clear image. You can really see a lot of the damage. And when you look at the satellite imagery today, it has changed so much. I mean, there are like no houses anymore. Look how many houses are in this photo, and now they're just parking lots and commercial buildings. But I'm still going to look around to see what I can find. Okay, I found a few interesting things, all right. Look at this driveway. This driveway is a bit suspicious, and so is this one behind me. Very interesting. Now, they actually recently got rid of this, so I had to go back on Google Street View to like 2013 to see it. Also, you can see in the street the old brick pavement. This is like Roman roads archaeology stuff right here. That's crazy. Now, if we go down a little bit further to this building, you can see how the brick pattern has changed halfway through. Now, in our clear image of the Brutalist water tower, we cannot quite see these buildings, but in this image, we can see the buildings quite well. And if you look at the damage, you can see that half of the brick building is damaged, and it kind of lines up with the brick pattern. I don't know. This is, I think, our best case for tornado remnants of the 1966 Topeka F5. Of course, that doesn't mean for sure this is, I'm not trying to say these are tornado remnants. They tear down buildings all the time, but I don't know. They're just a little suspect. That's all I'm saying. So yes, that is our tornado remnants portion of the video. There are some potential pieces of tornado remnants. Let me know what you think in the comments. But with that said, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.